on YouTube, The Retro Beard here. I know I want to talk about older systems and failed systems, but I couldn't let my favorite holiday go by without talking about a little bit of horror. Um, Halloween's my favorite holiday. I love it. I love getting to dress up. We do big costumes, big parties, and of course, lots of candy. So who can't love that a little bit? We spend the entire month in my house watching nothing but horror movies every night. It's fantastic. So, without further ado, let's talk a little bit about horror. And before I get started, if you haven't liked the channel, please do. Also, please like this video and click the bell for the notifications so you can get notified when I do other content. All right, so horror. To me, it's one of the world's truly amazing genres. From ghost tales around campfires to truly terrifying cinematic experiences that we have now. Horror has so many subgenres within it. You can easily dive into whatever you want, but I'm not going to do that here, right? I'm here to talk about games. I'm here to talk about my favorite horror genre, which is survival horror, right? What makes survival horror a bit different versus your kind of typical first-person shooter horror or your action horror, which would be like Left 4 Dead or even Fear. I know by saying Fear, I'm going to get some hate mail on that one, but you have too much ammo. I don't know what you want me to do about it. Survival horror to me revolves really around survival, right? It kind of stems from Japanese horror movies versus American horror movies. If you look at American horror in the 80s, even the early 90s, a lot of it was, your typical blood, guts, action, Jason, Freddy Krueger. There's a lot of to it, right? I don't know how to describe it other than that. Versus your Japanese horror, which tend to survive more around music and psychological terror and, messing with the mind way more than just, shock value type stuff. So in survival horror games, you're totally underarmed, you're under-resourced, and you have to deal with all kinds of puzzles and psychological terrors trying to hit you head on, even though you don't have the resources to really, prepare and deal with it. So if I go back a little bit to my childhood, I would say my first survival horror, technically the name wasn't created by then, probably would have been 1989's Friday the 13th. I think like a lot of us, for the NES, that was put out by LJN, which I think everybody knows is the king of licensed products. They licensed everything for the NES. But with this one, listen to the synopsis. I love this. It's a pretty typical summer at Camp Crystal Lake. There's a group of happy children staying at the camp. Who wouldn't be happy at Camp Crystal Lake? You and your 6 camp counselors' friends are watching over the kids while enjoying the lake and the wilderness. The days are bright and sunny. Also, the nights are cool and dreary, and Jason is on a rampage. That's awesome, right? It's a fun little side scroller. It's got elements of 1986's Castlevania, right? With like the torches and the knives and that kind of stuff. It's got RPG elements to it. And a lot of the combat style when you fight Jason kind of images Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. There's a lot of dodging, throwing punches, and just kind of dealing with that. But the whole idea of that game was you had to survive 3 days and 3 nights, and also try to kill Jason Voorhees while making sure all the counselors and the kids didn't die. So I mean, that's pretty head on. I honestly love that game. I love the ridiculous color pattern. Jason's purple in that game. You can also fight against Jason's mother in a hidden level. She's a disembodied head of, kind of looks like Medusa more than anything. I guess they're supposed to be the worm coming out of her head from the second movie that you saw, but who knows? But I enjoy that game. I own it. I have that complete in box, which I love. But I vaguely, I remember it a lot because, I started out a lot with the NES, and that's one of the few games that I remember my sister's playing with me. So, it's pretty awesome. A lot of good memories from that one. But what a lot of people around consider kind of the mother of survival horror is a Japanese game that was released for the Famicom. In 1989, it was called Sweet Home. Now I don't have any personal experience playing that one. Sweet Home's gameplay revolved a lot around puzzles, using stored items in a limited inventory, while battling and escaping horrific creatures, right? Which could lead to permanent death of any of the characters, thus creating tension and emphasis on the survival portion. Now, if that sounds very familiar to you, it's because it was created by a guy named Takuro Fujiwara. I don't think I messed that up actually. Who created some fantastic games for Capcom, right? He created Ghosts and Goblins, Bionic Commando, and just some fantastic games. But it was his remake of Sweet Home in 1996 that kind of kicked off the survival horror genre, right? And it's this little game, you've probably never heard of it, but it's called Resident Evil. I tell you, Resident Evil, when it came out in 96, I was 14, blew my mind. From the door loading screens to the creepy puzzles, I don't know why it sticks with me the most, but my favorite puzzle to me is the piano, where you have to find all the notes to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. But for some reason, that puzzle has never escaped my brain. But it is a beautiful game, super suspenseful. You didn't know what was coming around every turn. Now, a lot of those games especially used horror movie filming techniques, actually, especially in that third person view, because they would hide enemies around corners where you couldn't see and build suspense that way using music to kind of get those jump scare effects that most people, I think, know from movies and love from the horror genre itself. The franchise itself spawned multiple sequels. There's tons of games out there. There's a movie franchise which I adore. The movie franchise is ridiculous. If you ask me, it's what I call popcorn movies. They're just high action movies, a lot of fun, good antagonist, and a good hero within that. And they're just fun movies. But I'm not here to talk about the movies. Personally, I would say for me, kind of the sequel, Resident Evil 2, was my favorite. It was, I don't know, it was just such a good game. I just recently, I guess during quarantine this year, finished the remake after it came out. It was one of those things that I think, like everybody, had a lot of free time to do, and I burned through it pretty quickly. Played both storylines and had a lot of fun with it. And I think that's one thing that made Resident Evil, right, really unique, especially with the storytelling, right? You're not just in survival horror, you're not just playing through and trying to bang your way through, right? There's story, there's elements to it that you just don't get with your standard kind of action game. And Resident Evil was one of the first. You had multiple characters you could play. You could do multiple storylines. They had multiple endings. Like, that game had ridiculous replay value, because if you didn't like the ending, you could play it through again with a different character, make a few different actions, do a few different things, and get a completely different ending. Now, a little bit in the middle, I think personally for me, Resident Evil kind of trailed off. They started to get more into the action genre, especially around 5, personally. But when they released 2017's Biohazard, I think that brought it all back. I'm super pumped about the one that's supposed to come out, I think, next year. And I cannot wait for it. But I remember playing Biohazard alone in the dark with the sound cranked up, and definitely being terrified of that first person immersion that the game had. It wasn't your typical, like first person shooter where you get the torso and you could see the hands. It was full on in-depth immersion, and it was stellar. Super fun game. Now, I could spend hours and hours talking about the games that I think the original PlayStation had, because I think they had some of the best survival horror games out there. I mean, we could talk about Parasite Eve, Fatal Frame, Clock Tower, D. If everybody remembers that game, I love that game. But I would say probably another personal favorite that really sticks with me from that era is going to be Silent Hill. Silent Hill to me took the psychological terror that Resident Evil had and definitely cranked that up to 11, right? The first installment in the series followed a character named Harry Mason as he researches, words are hard, kids, as he searches for his missing adopted daughter in the mysterious town of Silent Hill. If you know the lore of Silent Hill, the town was, a coal fire, and it still burns below the city, and it's abandoned, yada yada. Which gives great lore to it. It's based on the city in Pennsylvania. It's kind of fascinating. But In the first one, he stumbles upon a cult that's trying to revive a deity that it worships, right? He discovers his daughter's true origin. And again, multiple game endings, multiple paths that you can do based on actions that you do. Um, I can still to this day remember the static of the radio that warned you when enemies are around, the fog, just the sheer terror of the sirens going off in that game as you scrambled to try to find cover before you got sucked into the other world, and that's when things got real, real. Again, just like Resident Evil to me, I think the second one was kind of the pinnacle of the franchise. Um, it was a fantastic game. The second installment, you're James Sunderland, kind of the same idea. You're searching for your deceased wife in Silent Hill after receiving a letter from her informing you that she is waiting for him there. And after searching the mysterious town, he ultimately realizes her death, true nature, right? And that's again, there's multiple endings in that one. I think there was 6 in that one, and they were all, you got the happy ending, you got the awful ending, and everything in between. Silent Hill 2 took all of those elements from the first one, again, cranked them up, right? You got the sound. They introduced, I think, one of the most iconic survival horror characters ever in that game with Pyramid Head. I don't think you can go to a Comic Con or anything without, or a game convention without someone dressed as Pyramid Head. They're always going to be there. That's a fantastic character. That was actually my first game that I purchased on PlayStation 2. That's the one that got me to buy a PlayStation 2. And it was fantastic. Now, I know I could spend the rest of the afternoon sitting here and we could talk about horror and we could talk about more games because there are a ton of them. And I think a lot of them are fantastic. But these are just a couple of my favorites. This is a little bit of a history behind survival horror. I hope you learned something out of it. Let me know what your favorites are, right? Leave me a comment. Let's talk about what you're seeing in survival horror, if you were a fan or if you were just pure terrified to even play them. I appreciate everybody's time today. Stay excellent to each other and have a great day.